The clock on the wall showed 11:30 p.m. as Rosa pushed her cleaning cart down the marble hallway of the Golden Oak Art Center. Her worn sneakers squeaked softly against the polished floor, the only sound breaking the silence in the grand building. At 52, Rosa had been working as a night janitor here for almost 4 years now, and she knew every corner of this place like the back of her hand. The Golden Oak Art Center wasn't just any building. It was the kind of place where rich people came to feel cultured, where tickets to a single show could cost more than Rosa made in a week. The walls were covered with paintings worth more than most people's houses, and crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings so high they made her neck hurt just looking up at them. Rosa didn't mind the work, though. Sure, her back ached by the end of each shift and her hands were always dry from the cleaning chemicals, but this job paid better than the hotel where she used to work. More importantly, it helped her save money for what really mattered: her daughter, Elena's future. Elena was 17 and had a gift, not the kind of gift you could wrap in pretty paper, but something far more precious. The girl could make a violin sing like an angel. When Elena played, neighbors would stop whatever they were doing just to listen. Even Mrs. Chen from next door, who complained about everything, would stand by her window with tears in her eyes whenever Elena practiced. But talent alone wasn't enough.
Elena needed proper training, and that cost money. Lots of money. The kind of money Rosa didn't have, even working 2 jobs. The local music teacher, Mr. Peterson, had told Rosa that Elena could get into a top music school if she had the right preparation.
But private lessons cost $200 an hour, and the good schools wanted students who had been training with the best teachers since they were little kids. Rosa pushed her cart past the main concert hall and stopped for a moment. Through the glass doors, she could see the stage where famous musicians performed for audiences who paid hundreds of dollars just to sit in uncomfortable chairs for 2 hours. The centerpiece of that stage was something that always made Rosa's heart skip a beat: a black grand piano that gleamed under the stage lights even when no one was playing it. That piano was a Steinway, worth more than Rosa would make in 10 years. She had looked it up online one night, curious about the instrument that seemed to call to her every time she walked past it. The internet said it was one of the finest pianos in the world, the kind that only the most skilled musicians were allowed to touch. Rosa knew about pianos, more than anyone at the Golden Oak Art Center could ever guess. Growing up in a small town outside Mexico City, Rosa had been the girl who could make magic happen with her fingers on the keys. Her grandmother had owned an old upright piano, missing several keys and always slightly out of tune, but to young Rosa, it had been the most beautiful thing in the world. She had started playing when she was 5, picking out simple melodies, by ear. By 10, she was playing pieces that made grown-ups stop and stare. By 15, she was the best young pianist anyone in her town had ever heard. Her music teacher, Senora Martinez, had big dreams for Rosa. She talked about scholarships to music schools in the capital, about competitions where Rosa could show the world what she could do. But life had other plans. Rosa's father got sick when she was 16. Really sick. The kind of sick that required expensive treatments and long stays in hospitals far from their little town. The family's small savings disappeared in a matter of months. Rosa's mother took on extra work, cleaning houses and selling homemade food, but it wasn't enough. Rosa made a choice that broke her heart but saved her family. She sold her grandmother's piano, the piano that had been her whole world, to help pay for her father's medical bills. With the money gone, and no instrument to practice on, her dreams of music school faded away like morning fog. She married, young, to a good man who worked hard but didn't understand why she sometimes stared at piano advertisements in newspapers with such sadness in her eyes. They moved to the United States when Elena was small, looking for better opportunities. Rosa's husband found work in construction, and Rosa took whatever jobs she could find, cleaning offices, working in restaurant kitchens, taking care of other people's children. When Elena was born, Rosa made a promise to herself. Her daughter would have the chances that Rosa never got. Elena would have music lessons and a good instrument and all the opportunities that Rosa had given up. Even if it meant Rosa would spend the rest of her life cleaning other people's messes, Elena would have her shot at something better. That's why Rosa was here, pushing a mop at nearly midnight, breathing in the smell of floor wax and furniture. Polish. Every dollar she earned brought Elena one step closer to the kind of future Rosa had once dreamed of for herself. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, working in a building dedicated to music, surrounded by the kind of beauty and artistry she had once been part of, but now she was invisible. The wealthy patrons who attended concerts here walked right past her as if she didn't exist. They saw only the uniform, the cleaning cart, the immigrant woman whose job it was to make their world spotless. Sometimes, late at night when the building was empty, Rosa would slip into the concert hall and just look at that piano. She never touched it. She wouldn't dare. But she would imagine what it would feel like to run her fingers across those perfect keys again. She wondered if her hands would remember the music that had once flowed through them so naturally. Rosa's manager, Mr. Thompson, was a decent man who treated his workers fairly, but he had made it clear that the cleaning staff was never, ever to touch any of the instruments. "These things are worth more than cars," he had said during her first week. "The insurance alone would bankrupt us if anything happened to them." So Rosa kept her distance, content to dust around the piano bench and vacuum the area near the stage. But every night she felt that pull, that ache in her chest that came from being so close to something that had once been her whole world. Elena knew some of her mother's story, but not all of it. Rosa had told her daughter that she used to play piano back in Mexico, but she had never explained how good she had been or how much she had given up. There was no point in dwelling on the past when the future was what mattered. Tonight was like any other night. Rosa emptied trash cans, mopped floors, and cleaned bathrooms. She dusted the fancy furniture in the lobby and wiped down the glass cases that held programs from famous performances. In a few hours, the sun would come up, and Rosa would go home to catch a few hours of sleep before her day job at the grocery store started. But as she pushed her cart past the concert hall one more time, Rosa had no idea that tomorrow night would be different. Tomorrow night, her carefully hidden past would collide with her present in a way that would change everything. Tomorrow night, Rosa would discover that some secrets are too powerful to stay buried forever. The next evening started like any other for Rosa. She arrived at the Golden Oak Arts Center at her usual time, punched her time card, and grabbed her cleaning supplies from the storage room. But tonight was different. Tonight, the building was buzzing with activity even at this late hour. The annual Golden Hearts Gala was happening in the main concert hall. Rosa had heard about this event from the day staff. It was the biggest fundraiser of the year, where the city's wealthiest people came dressed in expensive clothes to write big checks and feel good about themselves. The tickets cost $5,000 each, and everyone who was anyone would be there. Rosa usually avoided the concert hall during events, but Mr. Thompson had specifically asked her to work around the edges of the party. "Just keep the lobby areas clean," he had told her. "These people notice everything, and we need this place to look perfect." As Rosa pushed her cart toward the lobby, she could hear the sounds of the party through the closed doors. Laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft background music that rich people seem to love. She had seen these kinds of events before during her years working here. Always from a distance, always invisible. The man everyone was talking about tonight was William Hartford. Rosa had heard his name whispered by the regular staff with a mixture of respect and fear. Hartford was one of those people who had more money than some small countries. He owned hotels, restaurants, and half the downtown buildings. More importantly for tonight, he was known for his dramatic gestures at charity events. Hartford loved being the center of attention. The stories about him were legendary around the Arts Center. Last year, he had challenged the mayor to sing karaoke for a $10,000 donation. The year before, he had made the museum director do jumping jacks on stage for charity money. He always found ways to put people in uncomfortable situations, but since he wrote such big checks, everyone played along. Rosa was cleaning the marble floors near the lobby when the doors to the concert hall burst open. A small crowd of well-dressed people spilled out, chattering excitedly. At the center of them was a tall man with silver hair and a smile that seemed to take up half his face. This had to be William Hartford. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hartford was saying in a loud voice that carried across the lobby, "I was just telling everyone inside about my talent for spotting hidden abilities in the most unexpected places." Rosa tried to make herself even more invisible. focusing on her mop and hoping the crowd would move past her. But luck wasn't on her side tonight. Hartford's eyes landed on her, and his smile grew even wider. Rosa felt her stomach drop. She had seen that look before, the look of someone who had just found their next source of entertainment. "You there?" Hartford called out, pointing directly at Rosa. "Yes, you with the mop. Come here for a moment." Rosa's hands tightened around the mop handle. She looked around, hoping he was talking to someone else, but there was no one else nearby. The crowd of wealthy donors turned to look at her, their faces showing a mixture of curiosity and amusement. "I'm sorry, sir," Rosa said quietly. "I'm just trying to do my work." "Nonsense," Hartford said, walking toward her with the confidence of a man who had never been told no. "I was just telling my friends here about a little theory of mine. I believe that everyone, absolutely everyone, has some hidden talent. Even the most ordinary person can surprise you if given the right opportunity." The crowd murmured their agreement, though Rosa could tell they were just being polite. These people looked at her and saw exactly what they expected to see. A middle-aged cleaning woman in a worn uniform, someone who existed only to make their world a little more comfortable. "What's your name, dear?" Hartford asked, now standing, just a few feet away from Rosa. "Rosa," she answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Rosa. What a lovely name. Tell me, Rosa, do you have any hidden talents? Can you sing, dance, paint, anything at all?" Rosa shook her head quickly. "No, sir. I just clean." Hartford laughed, but it wasn't a mean laugh. It was the laugh of someone who thought he was being incredibly clever. "Oh, I doubt that very much. I bet if we put you to the test, you might surprise us all." By now, more people had come out of the concert hall to see what was happening. Rosa counted at least 30 people watching her, all dressed in clothes that cost more than she made in a month. She felt trapped, like a deer caught in headlights. "I'll tell you what," Hartford announced, his voice getting louder so everyone could hear. "I'm going to make this interesting. Rosa, I want you to go into that concert hall and play one note on the piano. Just one single note. Any note at all. If you can do that, I will personally write a check for $10,000 to the Golden Oak Art Center's scholarship fund." The crowd erupted in excited chatter. $10,000 was real money, even to these wealthy people. It was enough to send several kids to music camp or help a talented student buy a good instrument. Rosa felt the blood drain from her face. "I can't," she said quickly. "I'm not allowed to touch the instruments. Mr. Thompson said—" "Don't worry about Mr. Thompson," Hartford interrupted with a wave of his hand. "I'll take full responsibility. Besides, what harm could one little note do? It's the easiest money this place will ever make." Some people in the crowd started to clap and cheer. "Come on, Rosa," someone called out. "It's just one note." Others laughed and made encouraging noises, treating the whole thing like a fun game. But Rosa knew this wasn't a game. This was a rich man's entertainment, and she was the show. Hartford thought he was being generous, giving a poor cleaning woman a chance to do something good for the arts center. He had no idea what he was really asking. Rosa's hands were shaking, now. The piano in that concert hall wasn't just any piano. It was the same kind of instrument she had once played with the skill of a professional. The same kind of piano she had dreamed about for the past 36 years. The same kind of piano that represented everything she had given up. "I really can't," Rosa said again, but her voice was getting weaker. The crowd was growing larger, and she could feel the weight of all their expectations. Hartford moved closer, and Rosa could smell his expensive cologne. "Rosa, listen to me. $10,000. That's more money than you probably make in 6 months, isn't it? And all you have to do is walk over there and press one key, one little key, and you'll have done more good for this place than most people do in a lifetime." The crowd was getting restless. Rosa could hear whispers and see people checking their phones, probably taking pictures and videos. This was exactly the kind of story that would spread on social media. Wealthy philanthropist offers simple challenge to working-class woman. "What do you say, Rosa?" Hartford asked, extending his hand toward the concert hall doors. "Will you help us raise some money for a good cause?" Rosa looked at the doors leading to the concert hall, Behind those doors was the piano that had been calling to her for 4 years. The piano she had never dared to touch. The piano that held all her buried dreams and forgotten skills. She thought about Elena, practicing violin in their tiny apartment, dreaming of music school but never asking for anything, because she knew how hard her mother worked just to pay the bills. She thought about the $10,000 and what that money could mean for other kids like Elena, but mostly, she thought about the choice she was facing. She could walk away right now, go back to her cleaning, and let this moment pass. Or, she could step through those doors and touch the keys of a real piano for the first time in decades. "Okay," Rosa heard herself say, though she wasn't sure where the word had come from. "I'll try." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Hartford clapped his hands together with delight. "Wonderful! This is going to be fantastic." As Rosa took her first step toward the concert hall, she had no idea that she was about to change not just her own life, but the lives of everyone watching. She had no idea that the next few minutes would reveal a secret that had been buried for 36 years. All she knew was that she was finally going to touch a piano again. Rosa's legs felt like they were made of jelly as she walked through the doors of the concert hall. The crowd followed behind her, their excited chatter filling the elegant space. The room was dimmed for the evening's festivities, but spotlights illuminated the stage where the grand piano sat waiting. Every step toward that stage felt like walking through thick mud. Rosa's heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. She had cleaned this room hundreds of times, but she had never walked down the center aisle as the focus of everyone's attention. The piano looked even more magnificent from this angle. Its black surface reflected the stage lights like a mirror, and Rosa could see her own nervous face looking back at her. She stopped at the edge of the stage, suddenly realizing she would have to climb up the small set of steps to reach the instrument. "Go on, Rosa," Hartford called out from somewhere behind her. "Don't be shy." Rosa climbed the steps slowly, her cleaning uniform feeling shabby and out of place under the bright lights. When she reached the piano bench, she stopped and stared at the keys. 88 black and white keys, arranged in the same pattern she had memorized as a child. They looked so familiar, yet so foreign after all these years. The crowd had grown quiet, watching her with the kind of fascination people have when they're about to witness something unusual. Rosa could see phone cameras pointed in her direction, recording this moment for social media posts and dinner party stories. She sat down on the bench and immediately felt how different it was from the old wooden stool she had used with her grandmother's piano. This bench was perfectly cushioned and adjusted to exactly the right height. Even the bench was worth more than anything Rosa owned. "Just one note, dear," Hartford reminded her, his voice echoing in the large space. "Pick any key you like." Rosa lifted her hands and held them over the keyboard. Her fingers were trembling, and she noticed how rough they looked compared to the smooth perfection of the piano keys. These were hands that had spent years scrubbing floors and washing dishes, hands that bore the evidence of hard work and sacrifice. She thought about Elena, probably at home right now doing homework or practicing violin. Elena had no idea her mother was sitting at a piano in front of dozens of wealthy strangers. Rosa had never told her daughter just how much music had once meant to her, or how good she had been before life forced her to give it all up. The silence in the room was becoming uncomfortable. Rosa could feel the crowd getting restless, probably wondering if this cleaning woman even knew which end of the piano made sound. Hartford was still smiling, but she could sense his confidence wavering slightly. Rosa's right index finger hovered over middle C. That would be safe. One simple note: collect the $10,000 for the scholarship fund and get back to her normal, invisible life. That was the smart thing to do. But as her finger got closer to the key, something inside Rosa began to stir. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in 36 years, the feeling of coming home to something she had lost. Without thinking, Rosa's hands moved into position over the keys. Not the position for playing one note, but the position she had learned as a child for serious playing. Her left hand found its place in the lower register, while her right hand curved over the melody keys. The crowd noticed the change in her posture immediately. The casual chatter stopped completely. Even Hartford's smile faded as he realized something was different about the way Rosa was approaching this simple challenge. Rosa closed her eyes and let her muscle memory take over. Her fingers found the opening chord of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, a piece she had played hundreds of times as a teenager. The sound that came from the piano was nothing like what anyone in that room had expected. The first notes rang out clear and beautiful, filling the concert hall with a richness that made several people gasp out loud. But Rosa didn't stop with one note. She couldn't stop. The music was pouring out of her like water from a broken dam, 36 years of silence finally ending. Her fingers moved across the keys with a confidence that shocked everyone watching. This wasn't the tentative playing of someone who barely knew how to find middle C. This was the playing of someone who had spent years mastering their craft, someone who understood music from the inside out. The Chopin Nocturne was one of the most technically demanding pieces in the classical repertoire. It required not just technical skill but emotional depth, the ability to make the piano sing with human feeling. Rosa played it as if she had performed it just yesterday, her hands remembering every subtle phrase and delicate ornament. Hartford's mouth had fallen open. He stood frozen in the aisle, no longer the confident showman who had orchestrated this moment for his own entertainment. The expression on his face had changed from amusement to confusion to something approaching awe. Other people in the crowd were having similar reactions. A woman in an expensive blue dress had tears running down her cheeks. An older man who had been checking his phone was now staring at Rosa with complete focus. The smartphones that had been recording for fun were now capturing something extraordinary. Rosa was lost in the music now. Her eyes still closed, her body swaying slightly with the melody. The piano responded to her touch like an old friend, producing sounds that ranged from whisper soft to powerfully dramatic. Every note was placed with precision, every phrase shaped with the skill of a master musician. The piece had several sections, each one showcasing different aspects of Rosa's ability. There were delicate passages that required feather-light touches, technical runs that demanded perfect finger coordination, and emotional climaxes that needed both power and control. Rosa handled all of it with an ease that left no doubt about her training and talent. As the music continued, word began to spread beyond the concert hall. Staff members who had heard the playing from other parts of the building began to quietly slip into the room. Mr. Thompson, Rosa's supervisor, appeared at the back of the hall with a look of complete bewilderment on his face. The piece was nearly 12 minutes long, and Rosa played every note from memory. She had learned it when she was 17, preparing for a competition that she never got to enter, because her father's illness had derailed all her plans. But the music had stayed with her, buried but not forgotten, waiting for this moment to emerge. When Rosa reached the final gentle conclusion of the nocturne, the last note seemed to hang in the air forever. She lifted her hands from the keys and slowly opened her eyes as if waking up from a dream. The silence that followed was unlike anything the Golden Oak Arts Center had ever experienced. It was the kind of silence that comes after something truly extraordinary has happened, when people need time to process what they've just witnessed. Rosa looked out at the crowd and saw faces she didn't recognize. These weren't the same people who had been laughing and treating her like entertainment just minutes before. These were people who had just discovered that they had been completely wrong about someone. People who were realizing that they had almost missed witnessing something magical. Hartford was the first to move. He walked slowly toward the stage, his earlier confidence replaced by something that looked like humility. When he reached the front row, he looked up at Rosa and asked the question that everyone in the room was thinking. "Who are you?" Rosa's hands were still trembling, but now it was from the emotion of playing again rather than nervousness. She looked down at this wealthy man who had thought he was doing her a favor, and she realized that everything was about to change. "I'm just someone who used to play piano," she said quietly. But everyone in that room knew she was much more than that. The silence in the concert hall seemed to stretch on forever. Rosa sat at the piano bench, her hand still resting on the keys, looking out at a room full of people who had just had their entire understanding of the world turned upside down. Hartford stood at the front of the crowd, his usual confident smile completely gone. He looked like a man who had just been hit by lightning. That was, he started to say, then stopped, apparently unable to find the right words. Someone in the crowd began to clap. Then another person joined in. Within seconds, the entire room erupted in applause unlike anything Rosa had ever heard. It wasn't the polite clapping of people being social at a charity event. This was the kind of applause reserved for world-class performers at the end of a life-changing concert. Rosa stood up slowly, her legs still shaky from the intensity of what had just happened. She had played piano again. After 36 years, she had actually played piano again. The feeling was overwhelming. Joy mixed with sadness, relief mixed with regret for all the lost years. "My God," said a woman in the front row, her voice barely audible over the continuing applause. That was Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat. I've heard it performed at Carnegie Hall and it's never sounded like that. Hartford finally found his voice again. "Rosa," he said, his tone completely different from the playful showmanship of earlier. "I need to ask you again. Who are you?" "Really?" The applause began to die down as people realized something important was about to happen. Rosa looked out at all these faces staring at her with curiosity, respect, and amazement. These were people who had ignored her for years, who had walked past her as if she were invisible. Now they were hanging on her every word. "I told you the truth," Rosa said quietly. "I'm just someone who used to play piano." "But that level of playing," Hartford pressed, "that doesn't come from just used to play. That was professional level. That was conservatory level." Rosa felt tears starting to form in her eyes. She had kept this part of her life buried for so long that talking about it felt like opening an old wound. But standing here, with the piano behind her and all these people listening, she realized it was time to let the truth come out. "I grew up in Mexico," she began, her voice getting stronger as she spoke. "In a small town where my grandmother had an old piano. I started playing when I was very young, maybe 5 years old. By the time I was a teenager, I was the best young pianist anyone in our area had ever heard." The crowd was completely silent now, listening to every word. Even the staff members who had snuck in to watch were standing perfectly still. "I had a teacher, Senora Martinez, who believed in me. She said I could get a scholarship to the music conservatory in Mexico City. She said I had the talent to become a professional pianist, maybe even perform with orchestras someday." Rosa's voice caught slightly as she remembered those long-ago dreams. "What happened?" asked the woman in the blue dress, the one who had been crying during the performance. Rosa took a deep breath. "My father got sick when I was 16. Really sick. Cancer. In a small town like ours, there weren't good doctors or hospitals. We had to take him to the city for treatment, and that cost money we didn't have." She looked down at her hands, the same hands that had just played with such beauty and skill. "My family had to choose between my music lessons and my father's medical bills. There wasn't enough money for both." The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. These were people who had never had to make choices like that, people who couldn't imagine giving up a dream because of money. "I sold my grandmother's piano," Rosa continued, and several people in the audience gasped. "It was the only thing we owned that was worth anything. I used the money to help pay for my father's treatments." Hartford had moved closer to the stage, and Rosa could see genuine emotion in his eyes. "Did the treatments work?" he asked gently. Rosa nodded. "Yes, my father lived for 8 more years after that. Good years, where he got to see me graduate from high school and get married. He got to meet his granddaughter Elena before he died. So it was worth it. It was absolutely worth it. But your music," someone called out from the crowd. "Without a piano to practice on, without money for lessons, there was no way to continue," Rosa explained. "I tried to keep playing on the old piano at our church, but it wasn't the same. And then life just kept moving forward. I got married, we moved to the United States, I had Elena. There was always something more important than music." A man in an expensive suit spoke up. "But your skill level, after 36 years without serious practice, you just played one of the most difficult pieces in the classical repertoire. How is that possible?" Rosa smiled for the first time since this whole evening had begun. "Music isn't something you forget, not if it was really part of you. It's like a language you learned as a child. Even if you don't speak it for years, it's still there waiting. Have you played at all during these years? Hartford asked. Never on a real piano, Rosa admitted. Sometimes I would practice on the kitchen table, moving my fingers like I was playing. Elena used to think I was crazy, tapping out melodies on the dinner table. I told her I was just remembering songs, but I was really practicing. The revelation was sinking in for everyone in the room. This woman, who they had seen as just another service worker, had been carrying around the skills of a concert pianist, for decades, hidden behind a uniform and a mop. Your daughter, the woman in blue said suddenly. You mentioned your daughter. Does she know about your background? Rosa's expression became complicated. Elena knows I used to play piano in Mexico, but she doesn't know how seriously I studied or how good I was. I never wanted her to feel pressured to live up to something, or to feel guilty about the choices I made. What does Elena do now? Hartford asked. She's 17 and she's incredibly talented on the violin, Rosa said, and for the first time that evening, her face lit up with pure pride. She's everything I hoped she would be. She practices for hours every day, and when she plays, it's like listening to an angel. Does she want to study music professionally? Rosa's smile faded slightly. She dreams of it, but dreams and reality are different things. Good music schools are expensive, and even with scholarships, there are costs we can't afford. I work 2 jobs, but it's still not enough for the kind of training she would need. The room fell quiet again as people absorbed this information. Here was a woman who had given up her own musical dreams to save her father's life, who had worked menial jobs for decades to support her family, and who was now watching her own daughter face the same financial barriers that had ended Rosa's career before it could begin. Hartford looked around the room at his wealthy friends and fellow donors. Rosa could see him thinking, could almost see the wheels turning in his mind. Rosa, he said finally, I think it's time we talked about changing some things around here. But Rosa had no idea just how much her life was about to change. She had spent 36 years believing that part of her life was over forever. She was about to discover that sometimes the most important chapters of our lives don't begin until we think our stories are already finished. Hartford stood in front of the stage for a long moment, looking up at Rosa with an expression that had completely changed from when the evening began. The playful showman who had challenged a cleaning woman to play one note for his own entertainment was gone. In his place stood a man who had just witnessed something that shook him to his core. Ladies and gentlemen, Hartford said, turning to address the crowd, but keeping his voice respectful rather than theatrical. I think we've all learned something important tonight about making assumptions about people. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. Many of them looked embarrassed now, remembering how they had laughed and treated Rosa's challenge like an amusing sideshow just minutes earlier. Hartford reached into his jacket and pulled out his checkbook. Rosa, I promised you $10,000 for playing one note. You played approximately 3,000 notes and every single one was perfect, he began writing. I'm increasing my donation to $50,000. The crowd erupted in applause again, but Hartford held up his hand. I'm not finished. Rosa, I want to offer you something more than money. I want to offer you a chance to come back to music. Rosa felt her heart skip a beat. I don't understand. I sit on the board of the Metropolitan Music Academy downtown, Hartford explained. We've been looking for a new piano instructor for our adult education program. The position comes with a full salary, benefits, and access to practice rooms with the finest instruments. Would you be interested? Rosa's legs felt weak again, but this time it wasn't from nervousness. It was from the overwhelming possibility of what Hartford was offering. You want me to teach piano? I want you to share your gift with others who might have given up on their dreams just like you did. Adults who always wanted to learn, people who had to stop playing for financial reasons, anyone who believes it's too late to make music part of their lives again. The woman in the blue dress stepped forward. I'm Patricia Wells, she said. I'm the director of the Riverside Youth Orchestra. If your daughter Elena is as talented as you say, I'd like to offer her a full scholarship to our advanced program. That includes private lessons with our principal violinist and preparation for conservatory auditions. Rosa felt tears streaming down her face now. I can't afford. Full scholarship means no cost to you. Patricia interrupted gently. Everything is covered. Lessons, instrument rental if she needs it, even transportation to rehearsals and performances. More people were stepping forward now. A man in a gray suit introduced himself as the owner of Rivera Music Store. I'd like to donate a piano to your home, he said. Nothing fancy, but a good quality upright so you can practice again. Another woman spoke up. I'm Linda Chen, and I work for Channel 7 News. Would you be willing to let us tell your story? I think people need to hear about what happened here tonight. Rosa looked around at all these faces, these people who had gone from seeing her as invisible to treating her like she was precious. It was overwhelming and wonderful and terrifying, all at once. I need to think about all of this, Rosa said quietly. This is happening so fast. Hartford nodded understandingly. Of course, take all the time you need, but Rosa, I want you to know something. What happened here tonight didn't happen because I'm generous or because these people are kind, though. They are. It happened because you never really stopped being a musician. You just stopped having the opportunity to show it. Over the next few days, Rosa's life turned completely upside down. The video of her performance, taken by several people in the audience, spread across social media faster than she could have imagined. Within 48 hours, it had been viewed by millions of people around the world. The comments were overwhelming. People shared their own stories of dreams deferred, talents hidden, sacrifices made for family. Musicians from around the globe reached out to offer support and encouragement. 3 different record labels contacted her about making an album. But the most important moment came when Rosa sat down with Elena in their small apartment to tell her daughter what had really happened that night. Mama, Elena said after hearing the whole story, why didn't you ever tell me you were that good? Rosa took her daughter's hands in hers. Because I didn't want you to feel like you had to live up to anything, and I didn't want you to feel guilty about the opportunities I didn't have. Your music is your own, Elena. It always has been. Elena was quiet for a moment. But now we can both have music in our lives. Yes, Rosa said, smiling through her tears. Now we can both have music. 2 weeks later, Rosa played her first official concert in 37 years. It was a small performance at the Golden Oak Arts Center, nothing grand or fancy. But the audience included Elena, who sat in the front row with her violin case beside her, ready to join her mother for the final piece. When Rosa walked onto the stage that night, she wasn't wearing a cleaning uniform. She was dressed in a simple black dress that Patricia Wells had helped her pick out. But more importantly, she was walking onto that stage as herself, not as an invisible worker, not as someone people looked through, but as Rosa the pianist. The program included the Chopin Nocturne that had started everything, but also pieces she had learned as a teenager, and others she had been secretly practicing on her kitchen table for decades. Each piece was a gift to the audience, but also a gift to herself, a reclaiming of the part of her identity she had thought was lost forever. Elena joined her for the final song, a beautiful arrangement of a Mexican folk song that Rosa's grandmother had taught her when she was small. Mother and daughter played together, violin and piano weaving their melodies together like a conversation between past and future. When the concert ended, the audience gave them a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. Rosa looked out at the crowd and saw familiar faces, Hartford and Patricia and many of the people who had witnessed her story's beginning. But she also saw new faces, people who had come because they heard about the cleaning lady who turned out to be a concert pianist. After the performance, as Rosa and Elena packed up their instruments, Hartford approached them with a smile. So, he said, any regrets about that night I challenged you to play one note? Rosa laughed. Only that it took 36 years for someone to ask. 6 months later, Rosa was teaching 12 students at the Metropolitan Music Academy and had been invited to perform with the City Symphony. Elena had been accepted to 3 different music conservatories and was preparing for her graduation recital with the youth orchestra. But perhaps the most important change was the one that couldn't be measured in dollars or opportunities. Rosa had stopped being invisible not just to other people, but to herself. She had remembered that she was more than just someone who cleaned floors and took care of other people. She was an artist, a musician, a woman with gifts that deserved to be shared with the world. And every morning when she woke up in her apartment, the same small apartment, but now with a beautiful upright piano in the living room, Rosa would sit down and play a few scales before getting ready for work. Not because she had to, but because she could. Because sometimes the most beautiful music comes from people who have learned that it's never too late to come home to who you really are.